Good morning, afternoon, evening, or, well, hello and welcome to this episode of Off My Bridge. My name is Guy, and, well, we are talking not about fixing Star Trek Generations, as I had maybe hinted at in last week's episode. Instead, we're going to be doing a very quick dive into my experience running Star Trek Adventures 2 at the Destinations, an unofficial Star Trek convention in Blackpool that took place over the weekend here in the UK. And I was the very lucky GM who got to run the game over 3 days. Each game was only 2 hours long, and it involved audience participation. The audience got to decide names, places, and then also got to roll all of the dice on behalf of my players. My players also were not fixed. It was basically first come, first play. And so I had 6 players who, for the most part, all arrived very early for the game because they enjoyed it so much. But we did have some folks swapping in and swapping out. What made this game interesting or special or noteworthy enough for me to want to chat to you about it? Well, very simply, what I did was, because the Star Trek guests that were going to be present were engineers from the TV series, we had Trip from Enterprise, Commander Kyle from Strange New Worlds, and Montgomery Scott from Strange New Worlds as well. As a matter of fact, I decided to pay homage to these individuals, and so I created 6 Starfleet engineers for the characters that were going to be in the game. I wanted to also see how Star Trek Adventures 2 handled creating 6 of the same character. Because oftentimes in role-playing games, if you have 6 thieves, 6 starfighter pilots, 6 mech pilots, 6 investigators, they often feel very samey. And I wanted to see if I could make 6 engineers that felt completely different. I was assisted by the fact that the writers of Star Trek have created amazing characters for all of the series. So I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to recreate the greatest engineers of all time, and then randomly hand them out. So I created Trip from Enterprise. I created Captain Scotty, having retired from Starfleet, kind of following through on his wish there before the Janolan incident. I had LaForge from Next Generation Season 2. I had Chief Miles O'Brien from Season 2 of Deep Space Nine. I had, who else do we have? B'Elanna Torres before she joined the Federation as a marquee engineer. So we had her in there. And then we had Hemmer from Strange New Worlds. And of course, we had Sam Rutherford from Lower Decks. Oh, yes. And each of them was remarkably different from the others. Sure, they all had really good engineering departments, but the attributes that they had were wildly different. If you look at it, you've got Captain Scott, who's got years of experience in command training. You had Geordi LaForge, who was the traditional kind of engineer. We had Miles O'Brien, who started as a tactical officer first, and then became a non-commissioned engineer. So he had lots of security as well. You've got Torres, who's half Klingon and who was Marquis, and so has lots of jury rigging kind of stuff. Hemmer has the mind stuff going on, and then Sam Rutherford's got the augmented stuff going on, plus the knowledge that all of the previous engineers did not necessarily have. So, for example, Geordi LaForge didn't know who Torres was, things like that. Now, the adventure that I came up with was, I went, what can I do to bring all of these different engineers from across time together? I created an adventure, a very small and simple adventure, because remember, this was for 3 days, and quite possibly each day was going to be a repeat of the same adventure. I didn't know how quickly my players would get through. So the adventure was Q the Magnanimous had discovered at the center of the universe a space station that had been built by some foolish bipeds in the past, and that the space station was going to fail in the next 500 million years, which is nothing in comparison to the cosmological time frame. So it's an urgent repair job. And so he brings in 6 of the best Federation engineers to fix this thing. It runs on the Omega particle, which is a perfect particle, but which will rewrite the entire universe from scratch if it is allowed to go critical and blow up, basically. And so that is the premise that our 6 engineers have to go through. They start in a blank room, and the only thing that shows them anything of any interest is a scanner above the door frame. Now, the scanner appears to be neurologically focused. That's how it operates. So think door open, and the door opens. This is what our team initially discovered. Now, something to critically bear in mind. Although all of my players were Trek fanatics, only 2 of them, I believe, in total, had actually played Star Trek Adventures, and they'd played Star Trek Adventures 1. Version 1, not version 2. So they were rookie role players, but veteran Star Trek fans. Anyway, they had a field day because the door opened into a corridor with 3 doors on the left, 3 doors on the right, and a door at the far end. Our intrepid heroes start to explore the rooms, where they discover 6 Ferengi engineers who had been brought from across time. But the Ferengi have worked out almost immediately that they can think it and it appears as well. And so they've coated their entire room in gold-pressed latinum and have conjured up a whole bunch of gold-pressed latinum, but are now in a financial crisis because they all have as much latinum as they can actually think. There are 6 Cardassians, which is problematic because they're also brought from different time periods across Cardassia's past. Some work for the Obsidian Order, some work for the Occupation, some are artists and poets from before the Occupation, some are dissidents, and some are Liberation Cardassians from post the Occupation. So they're in a standoff between each other as to who should be in charge. There are also 6 Romulans, 3 of which have taken over the actual engineering core and are defending it against anybody who might try and come in. They shoot at the PCs the moment they try and open the door to the engineering section, preventing them from actually getting to the engineering section. There was then another room that was frigidly cold, and the PCs initially thought that there might be Breen behind that door. However, they discovered later on that that chamber was actually the chamber where the power was leaking out into space. It had a rupture in it from some unknown cause, and they needed to seal that rupture. That was effectively how they fixed the station. Super simple if they just opened that door. But they were cautious and did what engineers did. They tried to problem solve and work their way through it. 2 of the other chambers contained, well, one of the chambers contained a Calamarain space entity. The Calamarain are antagonists of the Q, or of Q in particular, and he'd brought one along just to prove a point. And the other chamber contained aquatic Xindi. The PCs for a long time thought it might be species 8472. It turned out to be aquatic Xindi, and their solution to the whole thing was to flood the chamber, the engineering chamber, with water so that they could swim in and actually fix the engineering systems that seemed to be malfunctioning. Nonetheless, the PCs are journeying around trying to resolve all of these issues when the Romulans discover they can materialize a Romulan warbird. This makes things a lot more useful for taking over the station. There are also 6 very angry Klingons whom the PCs encountered at first, as a matter of fact. That was the room that they chose to open up. And the Klingons at first are confrontational, but eventually will work with the PCs. The Klingons create a Vorcha-class cruiser to go up against the Romulan Dederadex cruiser, and through various shenanigans, the PCs ended up on the Romulan ship, and then they managed to beam onto the Klingon ship, and it was just It was just a lot of fun. Eventually they seal the breach, convince the Ferengi that the Ferengi have now reached a utopia where everybody has as much latinum as everybody else, and bingo, the whole thing was solved. What made it much more of a time issue was the fact that every time the station manipulated and created something, like a Romulan warbird or tons and tons of latinum, it put a strain on the whole system, causing it to get closer and closer to a breach, which they nearly got to, but managed to avert it just in the nick of time. What I loved was that each player who came in and was playing one of the different types of engineers solved the engineering problem in a very different way to how everybody else was kind of thinking about it. And it really showed to me the strength that the system has to be able to create 6 engineers who felt very different, and at no point did it feel like any one person was being overshadowed by another. The PCs worked together. They helped each other out. Oh, you're good at cybernetics? Oh, I'm pretty good at cybernetics. Let's work together whilst the other 2 go off and do something with transporters or with power regulation systems. It was, I have to say, an absolute blast. The players, the audience who were rolling on behalf of the players, the audience, they suffered so much. They would fail critical rolls. They would pass ridiculously easy rolls. It was a lot of fun. Of course, they saved the day, and then Q sent them back home to wherever it was that they came from without any memory of what had transpired. Massive thank you to my wonderful players and to the audience who came through, and to the room captain who allowed us to use the room for a little bit longer than we might have been allocated, and to Destinations for setting it up. Now, Modiphius did send me to the convention, so a huge thank you to Modiphius, not only for sending me there, but also for creating Star Trek Adventures 2. And of course, remember, you can grab copies of the rulebooks from their websites in whatever country you happen to be. Next week, we finish fixing Star Trek Generations, and I think you'll find the conclusion to be a little more satisfactory than we've had before. You had some very interesting suggestions for Part 3, so I will be interested to see what you think of Part 4. Until next week, however, I wish you long life and happy gaming.